so exciting. Okay. So about the Virginia Herpetological Society, it was organized in 1958, and it brings together people interested in advancing their knowledge of Virginia's reptiles and amphibians. The VHS encourages scientific study of Virginia herpetofauna and its conservation. Education continues to be an important social function. Mr. Larry Mendoza is our presenter, and his assistant is Mr. David Perry. Right. Larry holds a Master's of Science in Biology from Virginia Commonwealth University and is currently employed at VCU working as the university's Laboratory Safety Officer and Hazardous Waste Program Manager. Larry has received professional training and certifications in the husbandry and handling of venomous snakes and has 10 years of experience in keeping and handling venomous snakes. Larry Mendoza is the past president of the Virginia Herpetological Society and is the current chair of the Regulatory Affairs Committee. In his current role, Larry represents the VHS when contacting local and state administrators, legislators, and other policymakers regarding the interests of the VHS. He also sits on the advisory board for the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries and advises DGIF on issues dealing with our native herpetofauna. Larry is the primary contact for education and outreach for the VHS. So, without further ado, and a lot of enthusiasm.
Thank you. All right. All right. How's everybody doing? Good. So, I guess I'm here to talk to you guys about snakes. So let me get first of all, a hand count. How many people here like snakes? Right. How many people here don't know much about snakes but would like to learn more? Okay, all right. How many people here actually hate snakes and want nothing to do with snakes? Okay, I'm not sure why you guys are here, but okay. We'll see if we can work with you guys. So anyways, now I am very happy to be here, and I'm excited to share, what knowledge I have accumulated over the years about these. Oops, sorry, that went away. Let it go away. There we go. Yeah, I keep watch. All right, that's my wife and I, and okay, so this might work today. All right, so I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to try to give you guys a little bit of natural history, a little bit of biology, and a little bit of knowledge about the local snakes you guys may find around these parts. In driving over here, I've never been out here before, but in driving over here, this looks like a very good place for snakes to be found. How many of you guys see snakes here, like, in the summer, randomly walking around? Are there a lot of snakes? You guys find them in your yards? Yeah. Find them in your house? Garage? Yeah, okay. Sometimes snakes have a way, and I'll talk a little bit about this, to get into your house in weird places like your attic. And people usually ask me questions like, how did the snake get into my attic? I'll show you how. So this presentation I'm doing today, actually Susan Watson, she's also with the Virginia Herp Society. Her and I kind of put this presentation together, and we did this about a week ago over in Charlottesville for a hiking group. And so this is just, I kind of tailored it for you guys today, which is really the same exact presentation, except I took one snake away from it because it's not found here. So, and so her and I did this presentation together. Susan's also with the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, so when she does this with me, we kind of do this joint thing. We do a lot of collaboration with Department of Game. But let me talk a little bit about the Virginia Herp Society. We're a 501c3 organization that primarily focuses on the research, the education, and the conservation of our what we call the herpetofauna of Virginia, which is basically all the reptiles and amphibians that are found here in Virginia. And so one of the things one of my favorite things to do is to come out and talk to the public about snakes, because snakes are one of the probably the most misunderstood animal, and that misunderstanding a lot of time leads to fear. And the fear then leads to things like, oh, I got to cut its head off every time I see one. Well, you know, and when people tell me every time I see a snake, I have to kill it in the yard, my question is, well, why do you kill it? And usually I get, well, it's a snake. And I said, okay, but do you kill the birds, the rabbits, the squirrels in your yard? No. So what makes the snakes so different? And a lot of times it's just that people don't know how to tell the difference between a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake, even though I would argue that even the venomous ones don't need to be killed. So, you know, this is what one of the big things that I've taken up over the last couple of years is this outreach, this education for everybody. So with the hopes that people get a little bit more comfortable with these animals and don't have to immediately think shovel or shotgun every time they see one. So that's one thing we do, and we are a 501c3, so any support we get goes directly into what we're doing. All of us in the VHS are volunteers, none of us get paid. So we have a membership, if you guys are interested, it's $15 a year. I know it can break somebody's pocket, but what those $15 do is it goes to helping us with these types of programs that we do for free. And also, we give out research grants, which is a big part of what we spend our money on for anybody who writes a research grant that's in college or even high school sometimes, or conservation programs. They write to us and we give them money to do their research. So, and then we also do a lot of work with the state parks. We do surveys every year where we invite the public out, which is great if you guys want to really get your hands dirty and look for snakes and lizards and frogs and things like that. We do a few a year. Some of them are members only, but a lot of them are open to the public. And we split up in teams and we go off into the woods for the day and we pack a lunch and it's fun. So I encourage everybody here who is interested in doing something like this to come on out and join us on these. So, all right, let me get into the snakes. So, snakes, or just shout it out. What do you think? What makes a snake a snake? Let's start with that. No legs, correct. All snakes do not have legs. That's good. What else? It is a reptile. That's fantastic. What other animals are reptiles? Go ahead. What else do we see? I mean, I got pictures up there, but if you look at those, you'd be cheating, so.
They lay eggs.
So they do, except some don't, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Some of our snakes actually, well, all of them are technically egg layers. So basically, they lay shelled eggs on land. They're called amniotes, and that is correct. However, some have developed a way to keep their eggs inside until they're ready to really literally hatch. And what they do is they lay the eggs without a hard shell, but it's really, the animal is inside a membrane, and they lay it out, and then immediately afterwards the snake just pops out. So it's almost like live bearing, except that it's not live bearing in the sense of mammals, where we have a placenta and there's exchange of nutrition. It's not like that. So, but that is correct. They all lay shelled eggs. So, they breathe air with lungs. They have scales and claws, at least the lizards and turtles and alligators, which are also reptiles. They shed their outer layer of skin, and they do this periodically as they grow. And they're what we call ectothermic, which means that they regulate their body temperature through their environment. So you'll see them basking out in the sun, or sometimes at night, if it's too hot during the day, you'll see them laying out on pavement that has collected all this heat during the day, and then it lets it out at night, and so sometimes they like to sit on that and get that heat from the bottom. But if they get too hot, then they have to go in and hide somewhere underground, under a stump, under some leaves, and cool off. And they keep doing this until they reach that magic temperature that they like. So it's called thermoregulation. It's called, and they're ectothermic. Ecto meaning out, thermic meaning heat. So it's outside heat, and that's how they regulate their body temperature. So that's essentially what snakes are. Now let's talk a little bit about snakes around the world. Now there's 4 pictures here. One of these snakes that you're seeing up there is native to Virginia. The other ones are not. Can anybody guess which one is native to Virginia? Over there? Which one do you think the copperhead is? What, on the bottom left, bottom right? Bottom left? Okay. So I will say this. The bottom left is the one native to Virginia. However, that is not a copperhead. That is an eastern hognose found in Loudoun County up in northwestern Virginia. And that building behind it, I used to work there. It's a neuroscience research facility owned by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And that's on their property. And they had some fantastic eastern hognose snakes. And I'll talk a little bit about those guys. They're really cool snakes. They do this really cool defensive mechanism when they feel threatened. Now the other ones, the one on the top left, that's an emerald tree boa that's found in the rainforests in South America. The one on the right is a native to the U.S., but not to Virginia. That's a coral snake. And we have 3 species of coral snakes in the United States, but none of them live in Virginia. And then the bottom right, that's a king cobra. And actually, that specific king cobra is now a friend of mine. I had it as a baby, but he sold it to the Virginia Zoo over in Norfolk. And if you guys haven't been there, I highly recommend going to the Virginia Zoo. It's found in Norfolk. It's a city zoo. It's AZA accredited. It is a really, really neat zoo, and they got a fantastic reptile house. And you can find that specific king cobra in its enclosure. It's the first animal when you come into a reptile house. The first animal you see. So it's really neat. All right. So snakes, 24 families. Okay, that means there's different groups of animals. For those of you who don't know, are classified into like different types, and it goes kingdom, phylum, class, family, order, genus, species. Right? King Philip came over for great soup. Okay, that's how you remember that. So there's 24 families of snakes, and with about 3,000 species around the world. And they're found everywhere except for like Antarctica. Because it'd be very strange to see a snake in that kind of weather. But they are found in all continents. So they are very highly evolved and highly effective group of animals that even without legs, and they don't need them, and arms, and they have been very successful. And you find them in all kinds of environments, in trees, underground, in the water, on land. I mean, they have adapted in many different type of habitats, and each one with its very unique style of living. So we talked about snakes not having legs, and so we call them legless tetrapods. Tetrapods means 4 legs. Well, how could snakes be tetrapods if they don't have any legs? Well, they evolved from animals with legs, a common ancestor that split the lizards from the snakes. So if you look at some of the more primitive, what we call primitive, but like the boas, you actually find pelvic girdles. In other words, they're remnants of when they used to have legs. And so over time, they didn't need them anymore, so those genes started getting out of the gene pool. And that's why now you see a lot of snakes without legs, but some still retain those pelvic girdles. So they're still considered to be tetrapods, coming from that lineage of animals. One interesting thing about snakes is they don't have ear openings. You never see a snake with an ear opening. And this is important because this is a good way to tell whether it's a snake or it could be a legless lizard. And we do have legless lizards in Virginia, but not this far up north. They're found in southeastern part. If you go down to Virginia Beach area, down in Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge, if you guys have ever been there, so they're these long lizards that look like snakes. So when you see one down there, you're probably going, oh, it's a snake. But if it has ear openings, then it's not a snake. It's one of those lizards. But, snakes do have what we call inner ears, so they don't hear the same way we hear. In other words, if you're screaming and yelling out loud out somewhere, the snake's not going to hear you. What they do hear instead is vibrations on the ground. Because remember, they sit on the ground, they're low, so if you stomp around, they'll hear that sometimes. They'll feel those vibrations as hearing, and they can get, then they can tell if there's any danger or food, something like that. So another interesting characteristic of snakes is that they lack eyelids. And yes, they do sleep with their eyes open. And what's interesting is that the eyes are protected by a membrane or a scale. So when the snake shed, how many guys have ever seen a snake shed? Okay, have you ever seen the head of a snake shed? Okay, you see that there's the eye scale there, and that's how they protect their eyes. So it's very interesting. So they don't blink, they don't have eyelids, they don't have ears. That's a telltale sign if you live in an area where you also have legless lizards to know if it's a snake or a lizard. So, let's talk about some cool features of snakes. Snakes have this really neat adaptation, and they flick their tongue. Now that's in slow motion, right? Yeah. So, and then in a second you'll see them do it in fast motion. Yeah, so that's how fast it is. Now, 2 questions for you guys. Why do snakes do this? They can breathe? They can hear? What else am I hearing?
They can smell.
They can smell. Bingo. You hit the nail on the head. That's how they smell. They smell with their tongue. What they do is they flick their tongue, they pick up chemical molecules in the air, and then on the top of their mouth they have this little groove that's basically what we call their vomeronasal organ, which we also have, but ours is pretty much we breathe in the chemicals and then we smell them, and this organ up here sends our signal to the brain that we know what we're smelling. Well, that's the same thing with snakes, except that with them it's done with their tongue. Okay, so this is does anybody know what kind of snake this is, by the way? It's an eastern rat snake. This is one of my snakes, and I was going to bring him with me, but he's in shed, and you do not want to mess with these animals when they're in shed. They get cranky because they can't see very well. So I couldn't bring him today. But all right, another interesting feature about especially venomous snakes. Now, this is pictured here. I just put this in this presentation to show you how highly adaptive fangs are. Now, this is an eyelash viper from the rainforests of Central and South America. They're really neat snakes. They are venomous, and they do deliver a bite through their fangs, okay, and they deliver the venom. But fangs are also used for other reasons. Now, if you can see here, what's interesting is that these animals live in trees and they grab prey, and they're usually hanging upside down, and they have to swallow this almost without arms and legs. So how do they do it? They manipulate their prey once they kill it with their fangs. They're also their dining utensils. They, it's kind of like they don't have arms and legs, but they kind of use these things. And then they have teeth on the bottom jaw that are angled backwards so that when they're maneuvering, the mouse can't fall out of their mouth. Kind of neat. So, these animals use these fangs for many different reasons. All right. Let's talk a little bit about how many snakes are there in Virginia. So we have about 32 native species, and 34 species and subspecies. Now the subspecies thing is what we call taxonomic categorization that allows us, and there's some controversy about whether animals are truly subspecies or a different species, and there's always work being done with these snakes and other animals too to find out really where they fit. And so oftentimes, ever since I graduated college, things have changed already with species names and even common names change sometimes. So, but we do have 32 basically native species of snakes. And we also have one that has been introduced, and I think the only place this animal, it's called a Flowerpot Snake. It's from, I think, Asia, and it got introduced here in this country through plants that we've imported. They find them in the soil. And the only population established, I think, right now is in like Norfolk area or Virginia Beach. That's where they found it, but it's an introduced species. So, but our native species, there's 32. Now, we talked about the families, right? In Virginia, we have, 5 families of snakes. And only one of these families, the Crotalidae, is the venomous family. So, chances are, just by sheer numbers, if you run across a snake, it's probably going to be a non-venomous snake. More likely, just if you play that statistics. But we have what we call the Colubridae family, this is basically what we call your harmless egg-laying snakes. These are your corn snakes, your rat snakes, your king snakes, things like that are found fairly common, around yards. Then you have the Nutricidae family, and these are your live-bearing snakes. I talked a little bit about that. But these are your things like water snakes and your garter snakes and things like that. So I have an example of a garter snake here I can show you today. And then we have what we call the Dipsatidae family. These are your slender rear fang snakes, and these are little teeny snakes about this big, and they're your worm snakes, which you find underneath rocks. And they call them rear fang because they do have little teeny fangs on the rear of their mouth, but they absolutely have zero clinical issues with humans. So even if they bite, which these guys don't even bite, I don't think they could even get a hold of your hand if they try to bite. But these are your worm snakes and your ringneck snakes. And then we have what we call, right here is the Crotalidae family. These are your venomous, and these are all live-bearing snakes. So when you hear there is a nest of copperheads or a nest of, rattlesnakes or something like that, it's not a venomous snake. It may be another species of snakes, or it may be turtles, or it may be lizards, okay? But none of our venomous snakes in Virginia lay eggs. You won't find eggs. You'll find, if you see them giving birth, they'll be giving life. And then the last family is this family called Xenodontidae, which is your robust rear fang snakes. And these are your bigger rear fang snakes. These are things like your eastern hognose snakes and things like the rainbow snakes, which are not found up here. But the hognose snakes may be found. You may run across those. But even those snakes, they call them rear fang. They do have some venom, but it's not clinically significant to humans. But some people that get bit by these guys may sometimes have a reaction. But, at the end of the day, what venom really is a modified, sort of like saliva. So we're, for example, venomous to potatoes. Because when we eat potatoes, our enzymes in our saliva start breaking down the potato, the starch. That's where the digestion starts. And all snake's venom does is initiates that process, but they took it to a whole extreme, right? So when you look at the rear fang snakes, they may be venomous to things like toads. They're going to be in trouble if they get bit, or smaller animals, but not for us. So 5 families in Virginia, 34 species, okay? And out of those 34 species, only 3 are venomous. And out of those 3, only 1 is found statewide, and the other 2 are found in specific locations, and I'll go over that in a minute. So where are snakes found in Virginia? We have one way to know where snakes are found or what species may be in your area is, first of all, know where you're located, because not all snakes are going to be found in all of these ecological regions. So we have the coastal plain, which is pretty much tidewater. This is your coastal areas. And then we have a huge area here called the Piedmont region. And right down here is what we call the fall line, and Richmond, Virginia lies right there, probably around here somewhere. And then the Blue Ridge Mountains, right? And we're near the Blue Ridge right here. Are we actually considered Blue Ridge here? I'm not sure. No, not yet. We're Piedmont, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. But we're close to the Blue Ridge. And then you got the valley, and then this little bit here is the Appalachian Plateau, which then extends into like the other states, Kentucky and West Virginia and things like that. So if you know where you are, you can then start to say, okay, well, I'm in this area, so that rules out certain snakes, right? So I'll talk more about that here in a minute. Now, a big question I get asked all the time is it illegal to kill snakes? So according to Department of Game, it technically is illegal to kill snakes unless they are directly posing threat to you or your family. But it is unlawful to kill or take and sell, especially from wildlife refuges and state parks. So unless a snake is posing a threat, it technically is illegal to kill. We had a a gentleman a few years back who I think he was retired from the sheriff's department. I forget the county, but he thought he was doing the whole community a favor by going down to the river and shooting water snakes. And he was kind of boasting about it, and it got on he went on the news and talked about it. Well, Department of Game and Inland Fisheries paid him a visit because what he was doing was technically illegal. So I don't know if whatever happened with that, but at the very least, they told him you shouldn't do that. Again, he was going out of his way to go and kill snakes. So keep that in mind. We also have some threatened and endangered snakes, which none of them are found here, but the Canebrake Rattlesnake, which is it's basically the southeastern population of our timber rattlesnakes that we find in the mountains. That specific population in Virginia is state threatened because it's a unique population, even though genetically it's still very similar to the mountain, but it looks different, it behaves different, it lives in a completely different part of the state, and so the Department of Game considers them sort of endangered, state endangered, and you know, they got this really bright yellow stripe that goes right down their body. They're usually a lot sort of brighter than their cousins over in the mountains, but you know, but they're genetically the same, and I'll show you now or in a minute the other population, what they look like. All right, let's talk a little bit about snakes that are found around here. So the first snake I want to talk about is the eastern rat snake. Okay, this is the most common and the largest snake we have in Virginia. These guys can get about 6 feet or so. I think the state record is 80 inches. So, but they can get even bigger. I think in North Carolina, I think they found like an 8-footer at one point. But they are large snakes. Now, when they're young, they have patterns. Okay, so a lot of times I hear people saying, "I killed a baby copperhead in my garage," and they send me a picture, but instead of a copperhead, it's a young rat snake. And you can see here they got these little kind of blotches. As they grow older, they kind of disappear, and they retain a white underbelly, but they usually become just jet black in the top. Now, some may retain a little bit of that pattern. You can sort of see it a little bit. It's still there. But a lot of times when you see adults out in the wild, they'll be fully black. Okay? So these are rat snakes, and they're found all over the state. 90% or so. Yeah?
What's the difference between a rat snake and a black racer?
That's a great question. She asked, what's the difference between a black rat snake and a black racer? That's a fantastic question. I'll get to that in 1 second. So these are the guys that usually you'll find like in your attic. Why? Because they're fantastic climbers. These guys can climb straight up the side of a tree. If you have a brick home, they can climb straight up the side of your brick house, you know. So they are a highly evolved species that has adapted to the trees and to climb, and they're just as comfortable even on the ground. So these guys can go pretty much anywhere, up, down, and you know, I don't think I've ever seen these guys swim, but you know, they might swim. I don't know. Have you ever seen? Yeah. They do swim? Okay, yep. But they're fantastic snakes that keep the rodent population down, but they will also go after things like birds. They'll go after not just the birds, but the eggs. So a lot of people find these guys in their chicken coops. If you have chicken, they will get in there and they'll eat the eggs and swallow them whole. It's pretty neat. So, eastern rat snake. Now remember, wide underbelly, climbs very well. He looks a lot like your black racer. Now I want to make a comment here about most people that talk about these snakes, they call them black snakes. There's no such thing as a black snake, technically. Any snake can be black. You have black rat snakes, you got these black racers, kingsnakes can be black. Hognose snakes can be black, rattlesnakes can be black. Some snakes come in different color, what we call color mutations or color morphs. So when we are referring to a black snake, 99% of the time I think people are referring to black rat snakes that they see. But black racers are also black. Now, the difference, try grabbing one. And the one that really goes crazy and tries to bite you and just goes nuts is going to be this guy. Racers are not very friendly when it comes to being grabbed. Rat snakes sometimes settle down. They're not as, they might get a little bit scared at first, but they tend to settle down. These guys do not. And they're very fast. They call them racers because if you see one and he sees you, he's gone. Whereas rat snakes tend to be a little bit slower moving, But the difference is with these guys, the only white part is going to be right underneath their chin. And the rest of their body is black. So black all around. Like the rat snakes, when they're young, these guys also have patterns. And one way to tell a baby racer is that the eyes are like really big. It's almost like they have to grow into their eyes. like puppy dogs have those big, big feet, and you gotta have to grow into them. Well, with these guys, their eyes are really big compared to the size of their head. That's how you know if it's a baby black racer. So, so again, these guys they're fairly common. Again, they're statewide. You find them all over the place, and probably not as common as your rat snakes, but you might come across one of these or another. But again, if you see a black snake, literally, like they are fast. Chances are it's a black racer instead of a black rat snake. If you find a black snake in your attic, that's probably a rat snake. Racers can climb, but not as well as rat snakes. One other thing that racers do is they will eat other snakes. They have been known to eat copperheads and other snakes. They usually will eat, though, things like frogs and lizards and things like that. Whereas eastern, we call it now the eastern rat snakes, no longer a black rat snake. Eastern rat snakes don't tend to go after other snakes. I don't think I've ever seen any indication that they will eat other snakes, but these guys will. All right, another common snake you guys will find around here is the eastern garter snake. Okay, these are very common snakes, and one way to tell whether it's an eastern garter snake is they have this really bright line that goes down their back, and they have this sort of like checkerboard pattern. But like some of our other snakes, they can be various color. You can find them sort of bluish greenish like this. They can be more brown. They can be a little grayer. It depends on the locality and what's what suits their environment. Because usually selection, the way it works is that if an animal is very well camouflaged with the coloration, chances are it's going to live to reproductive age, breed, and breed more of the same. Whereas if you have a snake like this sitting on top of this green, that'll be picked off pretty quickly by predators. So that's how it works, and that's why you have these different color variations depending on the habitat. But regardless of that, they still share a common trait, which is sort of this big line down here. And also, these guys are very interesting. When they flick their tongue is like really, really, really red, and it's got a black tip, but it's you can really see that tongue flick with these guys. And one thing these guys like to do is they will puff out their jaws when they feel threatened, to make themselves look scary. So they'll do that, like this guy here. You see he's got this really, and I got some other pictures I think I could show you. But these guys are very common. They're found in, a lot of people call them garden snake. The correct term is garter snake. But sometimes you find these, in your yard and garden and things like that. All right. This is probably the one snake, the northern water snake, that it gets probably the worst reputation besides the water moccasin, which most people mistake this for. So water snakes are harmless snakes that live around water. They hunt in the water. They feel comfortable in the water. When they bask, they usually bask right above the water, so if they feel threatened, they'll bloop, drop right in the water and swim off. They're exceptional swimmers and exceptional hunters on the water. Now, they are harmless. They don't have venom, but a lot of people mistake them for water moccasins or cottonmouths because most people just associate any snake in the water, with it being a very dangerous water snake or water moccasin. But these guys are found statewide. They are around here. What you don't have around here, however, are water moccasins. They don't exist this far north. They're down in the southeastern part of the state. So these guys are also, they can look very kind of variable. They can look like, this, or they can be more pronounced like this, or they can even be really dark. One thing about these guys, though, is if you can see their pattern, a lot of times they'll have thin bars on the side, they get thick on top, and they get thin on the other side. And this is an important distinction because when I talk about the Copperheads, it's going to be the opposite, and I'll show you a picture and how sometimes people confuse these guys. But these are found, Lake Monticello probably has them. I'm pretty sure there's some around here. And so they're very common around bodies of water. Okay? Now, when you see these guys swim, what will happen is the top of the head is what you see. The rest of the body kind of trails underneath. With water moccasins, if you ever go down to south, if you go to Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge, you got millions of these guys around water moccasins. But water moccasins will float their whole body on the water, and that's how they swim. So if you're in an area where both species are found, then that's how you tell them apart in the water when they're swimming. All right, this is a neat snake. Very hard to see, very hard to find, but they're fairly common. This is the northern rough green snake, okay? Now, these guys are found in bushes and low trees. They camouflage extremely well. One unique thing about these snakes is when they die, they turn blue. And so I've had people tell me they found a dead blue snake. I'm like, blue? And at first I was like, what do you mean? This is a blue snake, but basically what it is when these guys die, that green pigment kind of decays away, and they're left with all the other pigments, and it gives off this blue color. So if you see a blue snake that's very thin, kind of sitting somewhere, that's what that is. It's a rough green snake. And again, they're very neat. These guys will eat, insects. They'll eat small lizards, things like that. And again, harmless. So if you see any green, so far, if you see any green snakes or any black snakes, those are harmless. And if you see pattern snakes, and I'll show you a quick way to tell them apart from a venomous snake. All right, worm snakes. These guys are fairly common too, but you won't see them normally unless you're lifting rocks or logs. Has anybody ever seen a worm snake before? Okay, good. Yeah, some of you have. So worm snakes, they literally do look like worms. When you lift a log and you don't pay attention, it looks like a worm. So a lot of people just mistake them for worms and go on their way. But if you look closely, they're not segmented like worms. They have scales. They will flick their tongue. They can fool people if you're not. So if you're out looking for snakes, if you lift a log or a rock and you see something that looks like a worm, give it a second look and make sure, because it could be a worm snake, and they're pretty common. In some surveys we do, these are probably some of the most common snakes we find sometimes. But they're harmless. These guys could, even if they tried to bite, I don't think any have ever tried to even open their mouth when being handled. They eat like bugs, worms. They'll eat larvae, like things that That's pretty much it, right? Yeah. But that's why they usually hang out underground on the rocks. They're usually just fossorial animals, and they go searching for little bugs to eat. I think they've picked off maybe very small baby reptiles, maybe lizards every once in a while if they can, but normally it's an insect diet. So here we have two species. We have the red-bellied snake, which I guess we are right here, right? Yeah, so red-bellied snakes, obviously the name itself kind of implies what they are, and these have a bright kind of red underbelly, and on top they're sort of grayish blue with this double row of lines. So that's how you know if it's a red-bellied snake. But they may look very similar to what we call the brown snake, or the Decay's snake, or Decay's brown snake. These guys also have a double row, and they can be also a little grayish, they can be brownish. But if they don't have a red belly, then it's going to be the brown snake. If they have a red belly, then it'll be a red-bellied snake. You know, that's pretty simple, I think, pretty straightforward. And, you know, the red-bellied snakes also have like kind of a white patch on their neck area, whereas these guys don't. So, you know, again, very common snakes. I've seen a lot of reports of these brown snakes this year. So a lot of people are taking pictures, asking what they are, and a lot of these are coming in as brown snakes. So again, harmless. Again, they'll eat small, you know, vertebrates, you know, small lizards maybe if they can catch them, but a lot of insects, you know, larvae, things like that. These are, you know, most of the snakes in Virginia don't get over 2 feet, by the way, with the exception of a few. And these are all of our, these guys are, they're small. The adults are maybe what, you know, about maybe a foot tops, depending. And so they're very small. Usually you find them, again, under logs, things like that. Although the brown snakes, sometimes they tend to kind of scurry about on the surface. All right, another small snake is a northern ringneck snake. Again, it's very common, mostly up in the mountain area, but it is distributed pretty much statewide. But the highest population densities are going to be, you know, towards the valley and the mountains. Now these guys are pretty neat. They have obviously ring neck because they have a yellow ring, you know, around their neck. Again, some of these common names are pretty easy and straightforward. Ringneck snake, red-bellied snake. And then others, again, are not very straightforward. They have something called a plain-bellied water snake in southeast Virginia, but it's got a red, it's a water snake, but with a red belly. So I don't know why they didn't call them red-bellied water snakes, but, you know. So, and again, these guys are again, you find them under rocks and logs, and again, same kind of diet. They're very small snakes, don't get very big. And their underbelly, the northerns are the yellow one, right? Yeah, they have a yellow underbelly, but if you go down south, you have the southern ringneck, and they have more of a reddish, I think, underbelly.
The ring is also split.
Oh, the southern, yeah. So the southern ringnecks, the ring is split. It doesn't fully go attached. It'll divide right here. But we don't have southern ringneck snakes here, so if you do find a ringneck snake, it's going to be the northern. You guys seen those? Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty common. You'll find them in your yard under leaves, you know, things like that. And then we have a less common snake called the eastern smooth earth snake. Now this guy is kind of it's again a very small snake, but it's kind of grayish and drab, and it's got some you know, little freckles around. I'm not too familiar. I don't think I've ever actually seen one of these in the wild. It may be found here. I mean, there's a population of them here, so you may come across one of these snakes. But again, these are small, very small snakes. Usually will eat insects and things like that. So this is another snake that gets confused with garter snakes. So they're in the same genus. They're Novus. Common ribbon snakes look sort of similar to garter snakes, but the ribbon snakes will have a line down the middle, but also you see a line on each side. And so this is how you know it's going to be a ribbon snake as opposed to a garter snake. Okay? These guys also, you'll find them more closely related to like water habitat. They like to be near water a lot more than garter snakes. So usually you'll find them near streams or you know, marshes, things like that. You know, fairly common. We do have a population, you know, well, they're kind of, you know, with the except for the far, you know, southwest Virginia, they tend to be found everywhere. Now, not as common as the garter snake, but you may come across one of these guys here. All right, now, this is a really cool snake. One of my favorites that we have. It's called the red corn snakes. Now, these guys are mostly statewide. We do have them here. They're also very good climbers. They are related to the rat snake, the eastern rat snake. They're in the same genus, Pantherophis. And the way you tell these guys apart from other snakes, and especially copperheads, is that they will have a series of just blotches on the top of their body. You see? They have these little, just little squares almost, and it goes all the way down to the body. Now, they could be bright red as this, They could be a little bit darker like this one, and then I'll show you one that is usually found in the central part of the state that's really kind of much darker. But the way you tell them apart is really, you got to look at these patterns and how they kind of, these blotches that go all the way down. Eastern Kingsnakes, another very cool snake. These guys also will eat other snakes, including copperheads. These are the ones that are known to eat the copperheads and rattlesnakes. They are resistant to the venom. They are not immune per se, but they're resistant to it. So when they get bit, it doesn't really affect them all that much. And they are black, but they'll have this white, kind of almost these white stripes going down across their body. Very easy to tell apart a king snake because of the black with the white stripes all the way down. These are also, people, so that's where this whole like, oh, if you keep black snakes around, they'll keep the copperheads away. Not the rat snakes necessarily, but these guys will hunt copperheads. Same with the racers. They will also hunt copperheads if they have a chance. But these guys are snake specialist feeders. They specialize in eating other snakes. But they will take rodents, they will take birds, they will take other things. But they have a very specialized eating behavior for hunting and eating other snakes. Then we have your hognose snakes. Now, I told you that these snakes can come in all kinds of varieties. They can be black, they can be brown, they can be red like the one I showed you earlier. And what these guys do, they do a really interesting behavior. When they feel threatened, they will, first of all, puff out kind of like this, like a cobra. And they'll flat out their head, and they'll hiss, they'll open their mouth, and they'll like do this like striking motion, but they're not biting, it's a bluff. Oftentimes they'll do it with the mouth open, but sometimes they'll do it with the mouth closed. It's all a bluff. They're trying to scare you away. Very rarely do these guys actually bite. Now, if that doesn't deter you and scare you away, which most people I think, oh yeah, I'm running away. If that doesn't work, if you're like me though, and I see one, like, oh, cute, look at him, and I'm not going to be deterred by that, I actually handle cobras, and so these guys don't scare me. So what he does then is they will, all of a sudden, they'll start to sort of act like they're in pain, and they'll start to writhe around, and they'll like, oh, and act like they're hurting, and all of a sudden they'll flip over on their back, they'll stick their tongue out, and they'll play dead. And that's what it looks like here. And the funny thing is, if you flip them back on their belly, they'll say, nope, I'm dead, and they'll flip themselves right back. So these guys play possum better than possums do. Because if you ever seen a possum play dead, they sort of look like they're having a seizure instead of dying. It's like, These guys actually, nope, I'm dead, stick their tongue out, and done. And then after about a few minutes, if you kind of hide, they'll kind of sort of look around, and if you say they see you, they'll go right back and play dead. If not, then they'll say, okay, good, and they'll run away. So these are really neat snakes, and one of my favorites that we find across the state. Queen snakes, these are really neat. These are, I believe, also, they're state threatened, right? The tier 4, yeah. So they have, they're on the watch. The Department of Game, their population seem to be in decline, probably for habitat destruction more than likely. But they're definitely found near water because they have a very specialized diet. And you see that the way they are is they can either be darker like this or a little browner, but they'll have these kind of dark lines that go down their body, but then you'll see these really bright line on like sort of on the underside part, and on both sides. So queen snakes, again, statewide except for the coastal region, but these you will not find these unless you're near water. And is it crayfish? I keep forgetting. Molted crayfish? Yeah, they eat molted crayfish. That's their diet. That's why you find them in water. Crayfish? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In molt, like that, molted because they're still soft, and so they go after them while they're in molt. So very good hunters underwater. Obviously, they go and seek out. So crayfish, when they molt, they tend to hide because they know they're vulnerable. These guys are very specialized in finding them and eating them. So, all right. One place to find these guys is Natural Bridge State Park. They do have a population. Actually, right near If you go on the trail to the bridge, right near the bridge, there's like a lot of branches and trees. Sometimes they hang out there basking on those little bushes, little bushes right near the water. So that's a good place to come and look for them. Northern mole kingsnakes. Again, these are a type of kingsnake. These guys, though, you probably won't see much because they are very fossorial. They do like to live underground a lot. They come up to the surface on occasion, but not a lot. And again, now some people might mistake these for like corn snakes. They have a very similar pattern, except that these guys, their bars that they go across are very thin, as opposed to the corn snake, which is more like a rectangle. These guys are very thin pattern. But they will eat, lizards. They'll eat, they'll pick up rodents, and also I guess they'll pick off snakes. But they are, they're common, but not seen very much unless you get very lucky and you happen to lift a log or something. They came to the surface. Most of their life they spend underground. Okay, eastern milk snakes. So these guys. So we got the eastern milk snake and we got the Scarlet Kingsnake here. These guys are found mostly in the eastern part, but we do have some populations that are statewide, but we do find them a lot in the northwestern part is a big population. Sky Meadow State Park has a pretty good population of these guys. Most of them will look like this. Brown, again, sort of like corn snakes too, but they usually don't get as red. Or they can look like this, highly variable. I've never seen one look like this. The ones I've usually seen look like this. Oh, it's not? Oh, man, I'm sitting there like doing this whole, okay. Yeah, I'm glad I'm teaching myself all this stuff. Thank you for that. I was assuming the pointer was showing. Yeah, so I've never seen them look like this. Most the ones I've seen have been more brownish. But they're still pretty neat snakes. They'll pick off a lot of lizards is what they eat a lot of, but they'll also pick off some rodents as well. Now this is, down here, is a very special snake. It's called the Scarlet Kingsnake, and it's only been found in a few counties in Virginia. It may be found here. I mean, we have a neighboring county, but we still haven't recorded one yet in this county. But they're very beautiful, beautiful snakes. They're related to the they're king snakes, but they're very unique king snakes with their coloration and pattern. This is a lifer for me. I haven't seen one of these out in the wild yet. I'm hoping to at some point. All right, so we went over about 20 or so species of non-venomous snakes. Now, let me go into just a quick, the venomous snakes that inhabit Virginia. So how many venomous snakes did we say are in Virginia? Three. Okay, very good. Now, of those three, how many do you think you'd find around here? One? You might find two. Definitely one, maybe two. So, one you will find here is the Copperhead. And the Copperhead is statewide, is the only snake that's distributed statewide, okay? All over Virginia. Now, how do you know if it's a Copperhead? Well, number one, if you see a baby, meaning a small snake, it could be a baby or it could be a full grown of some of the smaller snakes. If it doesn't have a bright yellow tail, chances are it's not a Copperhead. They will lose this tail, the color, about a year or so as they grow. But when they're young, when they're first born, usually within the first year of their life, they'll have this bright yellow tail. So if you see a snake with a bright yellow tail, like a fluorescent, then yes, venomous, definitely. Yeah? Oh, no, they're not. They look like they're just tail. It looks like a head attached to a long tail. But the tail usually starts right at what we call the cloacal opening, where they go to the bathroom. It's right after that, the rest of that snake is a tail. Yeah? But it does look like one long tail, doesn't it? Now, one thing about Copperheads also is that they're pit vipers, okay? And they have a heat-sensing pit and vertical eye pupils, okay? But the best way, because most people are like, I'm not going to get that close to look at a snake in the eyes. I mean, I don't know why. But, no. But one quick way to tell these guys apart from any other snake in Virginia is this pattern here. See that? Looks like a Hershey's kiss. Or if you look from the top, it may look like a bow tie, or it may look like hourglass. But that's it. It's thick on the side, and then it gets thin on top. That's a copperhead, hands down. There's no other snake. Now remember the water snakes I told you? They're thin on the side and they get thick on top. It's the opposite. These guys, if you see anything that resembles a Hershey's kiss or an hourglass or or a bow tie, that is going to be a copperhead, hands down. Now what you might find here, we're still in Piedmont, but we may get close to timber rattlesnake territory maybe. It's wouldn't be unlikely to find one here where we are. Is this us right here? It wouldn't be unlikely, for them to be here, maybe. They do come down sometimes, people have seen them. But rattlesnakes look like, well, first of all, they have a rattle. But if you don't see the rattle, you look for this, it's a chevron type of pattern. It's kind of like zigzag. But they can be black, they can be brown, they can be yellow, like this. And again, they're pit vipers, and they have vertical eyes, and they have that heat-sensing pit. Which brings me to this slide. Again, we talked about the families of snakes. The crotalids, or the viperids, depending on which nomenclature you use, all are pit vipers. All the ones in Virginia. Our moccasins, our rattlesnakes, and our copperheads are pit vipers that all have those very similar characteristics. Heat-sensing pit, vertical eyes. Now, the venomous snakes also, when we talk about the tail issue, right? If you look at the tail of non-venomous species, so this is the cloacal opening, this is where they go to the bathroom, and if you look right after that, they got single rows of scales, then the cloacal plate, and then double rows of scales. Whereas venomous snakes, on the other hand, will have single row, you got the cloacal opening, and then still single row. Now, most people are like, I'm not going to grab a snake tail to, But what if you find a snake shed? Then at least you know if it's venomous or not, if you can find the tail part. So these are really the characteristics. Our non-venomous snakes will have round pupils like us, and they don't have that heat-sensing pit. Now, this is only true for Virginia. Okay, if you go to like Thailand, don't follow this rule. They have cobras and stuff out there that don't have heat-sensing pits and have round pupils, so don't go, I remember that Larry guy said this one's non-venomous, I can go grab it, and it's a cobra, and then, so. Actually, that's a great question. Rattlesnakes have mastered that art, but a lot of other snakes will rattle their tail. They'll do it in a leaf litter, and so it kind of sounds like it's a rattlesnake. So the question is, which came first, the rattle or the behavior? I don't know. Do you know? Yeah. That'd be interesting, because either the non-venomous snakes are mimicking the rattlesnakes, or, because it's called mimicry behavior, or this behavior of shaking the tail sort of has been around in snakes for a while, and then the rattlesnakes just evolved to the extreme, where they actually develop rattles. Because that shaking of the tail won't work unless they're like in leaf litter. They gotta shake it up against something. So, but yeah, that's good. A lot of snakes do it. Corn snakes, rat snakes, racers, king snakes. I've seen copperheads will even do it. So, yeah, pretty neat. So again, this is how you know. And sometimes you don't even have to get that close to the snake to see. Now, the only thing about this is if it's kind of at dusk or at night, or they do dilate their pupils like us, to let more light in. And so sometimes it doesn't always look that elliptical. During the daytime like this in the sun, oh yeah, it's going to be very dramatic. But otherwise, but that heat-sensing pit is the other way to tell apart. And with the copperheads, it's going to be that pattern, horseshoe pattern. So again, just to show you what they look like, a baby eastern rat snake will have a pattern that looks like that. The hognose snakes sometimes will have patterns like that. The mole kingsnakes, water snakes, their pattern, it's not always that bright, but they're very thick on top and it gets thin on the bottom. But the Copperhead is going to be always like this. Now this sometimes is broken up. Sometimes they don't meet, but that's what you're looking for. Yeah?
Is this picture on your website?
Yes.
That is cool.
Yeah. Actually, and yeah, so if you go on our website, we actually have a much more detailed part of this, and all these pictures are found there. So we compare side by side Copperhead with a water snake, a Copperhead with a corn snake, a Copperhead with a, to show the difference. So on our website, yeah. Our webmaster, John White, has done a fantastic job with our website to the point where even people from Europe call us to sometimes use some of our pictures. I had an Italian herpetologist ask if we could use one of our green turtle pictures in an almanac of reptiles of the Campania region in Italy. It's in central Italy. And I said, sure. And then he sent me a copy of the actual almanac and autograph, which is kind of neat. But to show that's how great our website. When people type in a reptile, ours is usually the first one that pops up. All right. Again, that bright yellow tail is very important. And if it's a baby, it's going to have. Now, see here, this is a Copperhead. Sometimes these little Hershey kisses don't connect. Sometimes they're, but sometimes they do. And this is more likely what you're going to see. Some that connect, some that are more disjointed. But again, very similar. Now, this here is this is a northern water snake, and this is actually a cottonmouth. And this is sort of to show the bright yellow tail. Again, cottonmouths also have that characteristic, but that's kind of the the big thing here. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Do these venomous snakes have natural predators?
Oh yeah.
That they fear?
Oh yeah.
What are they?
Man's number one. Habitat destruction. No, but they have. Birds, herons, raccoons. The copperheads and some of the venomous snakes are hunted by the kingsnakes, by the racers. I don't know, a lot of different, like birds of prey will hunt them. They definitely have predators. They definitely have, especially as babies, they get picked up really quickly by predators. Even fish sometimes, big bass will pick off little ones, if they're swimming across the water. So now, I want to talk a little bit about, venom is a scary thing. People are afraid of snakes mostly because of the venom issue, especially if you don't know. But I want to remind everybody that snake venom is being used right now in research, and there's a lot of promise in things like cancer. So the Copperhead venom is now showing a lot of promise to help cure breast cancer. Okay, there's a former member of the Virginia Herpetological Society. Her name is Joy Ware. She's right now, unfortunately, in hospice. She came down with dementia, but she's been a long time proponent of snakes. But she was also a cancer biologist at MCV, at the Medical College of Virginia. And Dave and I have been on numerous trips with her on looking for. She was very passionate about snakes, and she used to tell me all the time, like, Larry, the cure for cancer is going to be found in snake venom. I guarantee it. And it's happening. We are looking and finding, but also like Brazilian pit vipers are being used right now in research for blood pressure disorders. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, the black mamba, considered one of the most dangerous snakes in the world. That venom can one day maybe be used to treat patients with Alzheimer's. So before you think about killing these animals, think about that maybe one day these guys might save your life. And so it's important that we conserve and preserve these animals even for our own benefit. Not to mention that they keep the population of rodents down that carry disease, like the plague and things like that. And other things like ticks, Lyme disease. These guys serve a purpose in keeping things in balance so that we don't have an overexplosion of rodents that carry these diseases. So when you think of Breast Cancer Day, maybe instead of getting a yellow ribbon, get a snake ribbon. And this is actually, there's a 501c3 organization called, it's called SaveTheBuzztails.com. It's actually dedicated to conserving the eastern Diamondback rattlesnake, which is south of us in Florida, Georgia, that area. But they actually sell these ribbons because of the promise. I mean, it looks like it's going to be it, you know, hopefully. So yeah, I thought that was kind of a neat sticker there. All right. So again, I'm going to wrap up the talk here, and then maybe we'll move into some of the actual snakes. But an excellent resource for snakes and all other herps in Virginia is our website. Okay, and we also have yes, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So you've identified you've got a venomous snake. You come up on it. You know, we're here in the lake area. Are they aggressive? Or, I mean, if you see one, they're not going to like try and strike your leg or something like that.
Right. So the question was that if you come across even a venomous snake and you see one, the question is, are they aggressive? Will they strike your leg, or will they come after you? And the answer to that question is not technically no, unless you are really messing with them. Yeah. So most people that get bit by these animals are people that are either trying to kill them, trying to, you know, capture them in one way or another, or trying to handle them. That's how people normally get bit. Rarely, on occasion, sometimes people put their, you know, they're doing yard work and they stick their hand in a pile of bushes and there may be one there. But that's, you know, you got to be super unlucky for that to happen. But it's mostly when people literally are trying to mess with these animals. Usually a trip to the hospital from a venomous snake bite is preceded by, hold my beer, watch this. So, you know, alcohol sometimes doesn't play a role in people getting bit. I mean, and people that keep these guys, you know, there was a few years back, this guy in Richmond who had a pet copperhead, and him and his buddy were drinking, and he was like, oh no, my copperhead is very docile. It knows me. Look, I'll show you. And of course, he grabs the copperhead and puts the copperhead head in his mouth. And of course, copperhead bit him on his tongue. So, you know, yeah. But I don't know what to say, you know, Darwin Award, you know. But the thing is that if you come across a venomous snake, best thing to do is just give us a distance, leave it alone. They will not chase you. That is a myth. Sometimes snakes need to go to, if they get scared, they have a den site or a place they call home where they feel safe. You might be in between them. So what they'll do is they'll move towards you, but not to get you. But it appears to us they're chasing us. No, they just want to go where they want to hide. So, you know, that's why, you know, people think they're getting chased, but they don't. Yeah.
What is a kind way to get them out of your attic?
A kind way. Well, you know, if you're brave, you can just go up there and grab it.
You do, really. If you found a snake in your home.
So, yes, the best thing to do is, if you can, if it's in an attic, it can be a little tricky depending on your attic, right? It's not a lot of, but if you can, like even a broom and like either a paper bag or a trash can, and try to sweep them in, and then you can bring them down. I mean, if you're like me, I just would go up there and grab it. Or if they're in your garage, though, you can sometimes, you know, those bristles, you know, and it also may deter them from coming back, too, if they have a bad experience. They're like, okay, I remember that place. I'm not going in there. It's a crazy brush person there, and I don't like it. So sometimes that helps. But, yeah, it's you know, a brush sometimes helps. A rake, sometimes you can scoop them up with a rake and put them in like a trash can, and then you can, you know, take them out to the woods. Most of the time, you know, snakes will only go, but the best way to deter snakes from getting into your house is to sort of snake-proof your house. And with your attic, what you want to do is you want to, you know, the attic vents that people have, oftentimes that's how they get in. So you want to put maybe some chicken wire and just cover that up. Crawl spaces, sometimes the crawl space vents, you know, put chicken wire there. But that's how they tend to get in your house. Or something like a mesh type of, something that they can't, you know, squeeze through. But that's the best way, is to kind of snake-proof your house. And I used to work for a snake removal company part-time back when I needed beer money in college. And I used to go to people's homes, and they used to tell us, or they used to find snake sheds in the attic, and they would freak out. I'm like, all right, let me go up there. And usually in the attic, you would find snake activity, the shed skins and stuff, but oftentimes what I would also find is, mouse and bird nest activity and mouse pellets and mouse nests and bird's nests. So I would come down and say, all right, I didn't find a snake. I did find a lot of snake sheds up there, so I got good news and bad news. I'm like, what's the bad news? I said, bad news, you have a pretty bad mouse and critter infestation up there. And I'm like, well, what's the good news? The good news, you got a couple snakes taking care of the problem. So, which then they kind of give me this look like, huh? And, and I would tell them, like, look, to get rid of the snakes in your attic, here's what you got to do. And you got to, resolve your rodent, because that's where they're going up there. There's free food. They got shelter. They're protected. Yeah, they're going to love it. So, get rid of your rodent problem, get rid of your bird nest problem, because, and these animals sometimes are coming in through the same route. So, seal up your vents and that'll take care of that problem. So that's really what you want to do. It's easier to prevent than it is to deal with it afterwards. Yes? Oh, fantastic question. It's neither good nor bad, it just doesn't work. It just does nothing. It's neutral. The snake, I've seen snakes sitting on top of these things going. So, now, any snake away or snake type of, on the market it's just a waste of money. The best thing to do is, if you want snakes to keep out of your yard, is to kind of sort of make your yard sort of not as snake friendly. It's kind of hard to do in some yards, but if you remove brush piles, wood piles, and you keep the grass, snakes don't like to be out in the open. They like to, sneak through. And also you want to make sure you keep all their food away from your yard if possible, So that's why if you have big brush piles and wood piles, that's a perfect place for lizards, a perfect place for, rodents, insects, and that's what these guys are going after. So yeah, they're gonna, but oftentimes a snake comes into your yard, it's gonna hang out for a minute, but then sometimes they leave. So, but that's the best thing to do, is to keep your yard clean, seal up all entry points into your house with either, chicken wire or some other, wire mesh or something. And that should take care of most of the problem. Doesn't mean you won't see them if you live in an area. They were here first, And with development happening, what happens is the populations get shifted and pushed too. So with the more development, sometimes people see more snakes in their yard. It doesn't mean that there's an explosion of snake populations. It just means that where they once used to live in their home is now being developed, so they need to go somewhere if they don't get killed by the bulldozers. So you want to make sure that you keep your yard, as clean as possible and kind of, clean up, any area. Yeah.
Birds come get the feed, but they drop some feed.
Yeah.
And guess what comes with the feed?
Mice and voles and
Snakes.
yeah. Yes.
If you see a snake in your yard, say a copperhead, and I have, does that mean there's probably more?
Not necessarily. These snakes have a home range, and they tend to stick to that home range. Now, that doesn't mean they don't, if they find a really nice spot to give birth in your yard, then you might have more because of that, but it's not necessarily true. But if you remove a copperhead and you put it back out into the woods or whatever, sometimes they do find their way back. Or sometimes another may take its place, but not necessarily. So it all depends on, it depends, but that's not always true. But if you live in an area where there's copperheads, you might find them. Yeah.
Do snakes drink water?
Yes, they do. They drink water, and it's really neat watching them drink. They sort of go to a water source, and it's sort of like a suction. They just kind of open their mouth and kind of suck water in, sort of like that. Yeah, it's really neat. You and then yeah.
So technically, it's illegal to move animals in Virginia.
Yeah.
Where point of capture.
Yes.
So if you have a copperhead in the neighborhood, you want it's a dead snake crawling because the neighbors see it, they want to kill it. What's the best way to save them?
So education is the key. Doing things like this and telling and spreading the word with your neighbors. It is, yeah, so the question was, it's illegal to move the snakes, it is illegal to move snakes from one part, I mean, you can move them to a certain extent, kind of like if, down a road, maybe, but it is illegal to take one snake from one part of the county, to another part of the state. And there's a reason for that. It's mostly to prevent, disease spread and things like that. That's what Department of Game prohibits that. Unless you have a permit, like an animal rehabilitation permit or something like that. I think you had a question, and then over there.
How do the snakes get along with our squirrels?
Oh, it depends on the snake, but a lot of snakes get along very well with the squirrels for dinner. They'll invite them in for dinner, and then the squirrels usually don't come back. But most snakes, like rat snakes, is that they will pick off baby squirrels and things like that. But mama and papa squirrel are those are big animals that got teeth, and so sometimes they can, scare off the snakes if they're getting too close to the nest. But, they're not exactly friends. One's a predator and one's a prey item. So, they try to avoid each other unless the snake is going after the babies in the nest.
Well, I was going to ask you, is it possible to import a certain species of snake to keep the squirrel population under control?
Well, I can bring my cobras over to your house. I'll take care of it. It's not, I mean, if you find a rat snake down the road, you can bring him in your yard and see if he sticks around. Sometimes, you can do that. I don't think there's any harm with that.
Hire someone, bring them in.
Yeah, the problem is, usually the snakes come there themselves. But again, if you have neighbors or people that are killing all the snakes, then yeah, you're getting rid of some of the predators for these animals, so you might have a population increase.
Is it a myth that copperheads and black snakes are made?
Yes, it's a myth. And that, I think, so the question was, is it a myth if copperheads and black rat snakes mate together? It is a myth. But what happens, though, is that copperheads and non-venomous rat snakes, or even racers that eat copperheads sometimes winter together in the same den. They actually will hang out together. So, and sometimes then I think that somehow turn into their mating. They're not mating, they just winter together. We've seen corn snakes and copperheads hanging out. One time we did a survey, we lifted up a rock, and there was a beautiful copperhead and a beautiful corn snake. Actually, I have a picture of it. Yeah, right there. So, they were both hanging out. Which one's the copperhead, by the way? Good. Which one's the corn snake?
Right.
All right. So, I'm not sure if their parents approve, but, that's how we found them. They were just hanging out. That's what they do. I was going to show you this picture because a lot of times I get a question of the triangular head being one way to tell apart snakes. Well, can you tell which one of these is venomous? Yeah. So, the top one is a copperhead, the bottom one is a harmless eastern rat snake, and what about these? Which one of these is venomous? All of them are venomous?
Top left.
How many of you say
Top left.
top left?
Yep.
Okay. Actually, it's a trick question because none of these snakes are venomous. These are all water snakes. And I think the bottom one might be a garter snake, but that's a northern water snake. I think that's a plain bellied water snake, and I think that's a... But notice how a lot of snakes will do that. They will make their head triangular. But if you notice, all their eyes are round. So, yeah.
Could you please discuss the habitat preferences of the common northern water snake?
Yeah, the habitat preferences of these guys are going to be literally anywhere where there's water. More so, not so much big open bodies of water, although you will find them there, but like, streams and river and like little, marshes and things like inlets. Yeah, that's where you find them. A lot of tree cover usually over because they will bask on the branches or big logs, and it'll plop in the water in the first sign of danger. So you do find them in areas where there's a lot of it's got to be water, but also a lot of tree and bush cover. Yeah.
The reason I asked, we have a lot of underdocked fish habitat.
Yeah.
And we have seen water snakes.
Yep.
We've encountered them.
Mm-hmm.
It seems they like riprap.
Riprap, yes, they will. They do like riprap, and the reason why is because they can hide and, you know, sleep in there at night, and sometimes the riprap, depending on how all those rocks are kind of laid out, may go even underground, and sometimes they even overwinter right close to the shore. So yeah, riprap is another place where you find them. You know, there's obviously food sources for them, so, you know, it's perfect, you know, for them. Especially if there's food and a great place to hide, that's going to be where you're going to find them. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
Will the water snakes eat muskrats?
Yeah, I don't think they would go after muskrats. Do you guys have a lot of muskrats around here?
Yeah. We have a committee about it.
You have a committee, a muskrat committee. No, unfortunately, you know, I guess maybe if a snake that's big enough comes across maybe some babies, it might pick them off, but not on and not water snakes. Usually something like a rat snake probably would do that. Although I think muskrats will prey on oh wait, no, they're maybe not.
I don't know.
Nah, I don't think muskrats prey on snakes, but yeah.
Are reptiles nice to other reptiles?
Depends. Unless that reptile feeds on the other reptile. So it depends on the species. Again, some snakes like to hang out together. It probably wouldn't be nice to it. It would ignore it, more than likely, unless it's a snapping turtle, then it would try to eat it. But, you know, animals aren't like us where, you know, especially snakes aren't really like us where they make, you know, they don't, at least not that we know of, they don't find things friendly. They may ignore or not find them as a threat, but they're not going to be like, oh, like, you know, I have pet snakes, you know, like these guys, they don't, you know, if I call them, they're not going to come to me going, oh, you know, they don't cuddle, they don't go chasing, they're not like dogs, you know, and so that's a big difference, you know, is that people that want these as pets, you know, don't expect them to know you. They don't know you. They're used to you. They will not bite you because they're used to being handled. They you know, but sometimes if you spook them, even the ones that have been in captivity, sometimes, you know, they'll respond. Yeah. Why don't we take a look at some of these? Yeah.